The dark side of Los Angeles is not what you think it is. And the truth about why nobody feels safe here anymore will disturb you more than any headline ever could. This is not about isolated incidents or random crime statistics that politicians spin into campaign talking points. This is about a fundamental transformation in how millions of people experience daily life in what was once called the City of Angels, a place where fear has become the background noise to every decision, every commute, every walk to the store. Over 198,000 people sleep on the streets of Los Angeles County tonight, visible reminders that the social fabric holding this city together has torn beyond repair. Crime shifts and morphs even as some numbers decline, creating new threats faster than old ones disappear. The perception of danger has metastasized into something worse than danger itself. The certainty that systems designed to protect you have failed completely, and nobody with power cares enough to fix them. What you are about to discover goes deeper than crime reports or viral videos of smash-and-grab robberies. This is about living in a city that stopped working for ordinary people, where survival requires constant vigilance and trust has become a luxury nobody can afford anymore. We all remember when Los Angeles felt different, when walking down the street did not require scanning for threats every few seconds. There was a time, not long ago, when parents let children play in neighborhood parks without standing guard, when couples walked home from dinner without planning escape routes, when tourists wandered neighborhoods with cameras around their necks instead of fear in their eyes. The city has always had rough areas, places locals knew to avoid after dark, but those zones were contained and predictable. You knew where danger lived and you could navigate around it. That unspoken contract has shattered completely. The boundaries that once separated safe from unsafe have dissolved, leaving nowhere that feels genuinely secure anymore. Homeless encampments appear overnight in neighborhoods that cost millions to live in, creating jarring contrasts between wealth and desperation that nobody knows how to process. Property crimes occur in broad daylight on busy streets where witnesses watch and do nothing, because they have learned that intervention brings more danger than ignoring. The psychological toll of constant alertness exhausts residents who just want to live normal lives without treating every public space as a potential crime scene. You have felt this too. That background tension that never quite releases, that awareness that safety is conditional and temporary and could evaporate in any moment. The homeless crisis has become the most visible symbol of Los Angeles dysfunction, an unavoidable reminder that the city has lost control of its most basic responsibilities. Over 176,000 individuals live without stable housing in the city of Los Angeles alone, according to the 2024 count, representing an 18% increase from the previous year. These are not abstract statistics hidden in policy reports. These are human beings living in tents that line miles of sidewalks, creating semi-permanent encampments in parks, under freeway overpasses, along riverbeds, and increasingly in residential neighborhoods where property values supposedly insulate residents from such problems. The encampments bring all the dysfunction and desperation you would expect when people live outside without sanitation, security, or social support. Open drug use occurs in full view of passing families. Mental health crises unfold on sidewalks as pedestrians step around them. Aggressive behavior from individuals experiencing psychotic episodes frightens residents who encounter them daily. The city's response has proven completely inadequate, cycling people through temporary shelters that solve nothing while encampments reappear immediately after clearances. Residents feel abandoned by their government, forced to navigate dangerous situations because nobody with authority will address root causes or provide meaningful solutions. The encampments themselves become centers of secondary crime, with theft rings operating from tent cities, drug dealing concentrated in areas where enforcement has essentially surrendered, and violence within homeless populations, creating dangers that radiate outward into surrounding neighborhoods. Crime statistics tell a complicated story that politicians manipulate depending on which narrative serves their interests, but the lived experience of residents tells a clearer truth. Homicides have declined significantly, dropping by 38% in the first quarter of 2025 compared to the same period in 2024, with the city on pace for its lowest annual homicide total since 1968. That sounds reassuring until you understand what replaces murder when it declines. Property crime has exploded in ways that touch far more residents far more often than homicides ever did. Car break-ins occur so routinely that many residents no longer bother reporting them, knowing police will not respond, and insurance deductibles exceed the value of stolen items. Catalytic converter theft became so widespread that it spawned an entire criminal industry, with organized rings targeting vehicles systematically and leaving owners with thousands of dollars in repair costs. Retail theft has reached levels where major chains close locations because they cannot sustain the losses, creating food deserts and reducing services in neighborhoods that already struggled. The shift from violent crime to property crime and quality of life offenses creates a different kind of fear, more pervasive and constant than the sharp terror of violent encounters. You cannot relax anywhere because anywhere might be where your car gets broken into, your package gets stolen, your bike disappears while you shop for groceries. The police response to rising property crime and public disorder has been essentially non-existent, creating a vacuum where criminals operate with near impunity. Officers do not respond to property crime reports in any meaningful way, sometimes taking reports over the phone without ever visiting crime scenes, often not even taking reports at all. The message transmitted to both criminals and victims could not be clearer. Property crime will not be investigated, prosecuted, or punished. Criminals internalize this reality and act accordingly, smashing windows and grabbing merchandise, knowing that consequences will never materialize. Victims internalize it too, stopping reporting and accepting theft as an unavoidable cost of living in Los Angeles. The breakdown in basic law enforcement creates cascading effects that poison community trust and normalize disorder. When nobody enforces laws against public drug use, open-air drug markets operate freely. When nobody responds to aggressive behavior, people experiencing mental health crises terrorize neighborhoods without intervention. When nobody clears encampments permanently, they expand and multiply. The absence of consistent enforcement does not create compassion or understanding. It creates resentment, vigilantism, and a pervasive sense that civilization has failed and everyone must fend for themselves. Neighborhood groups and community organizations struggle to address problems that should be governmental responsibilities but have been abandoned to private citizens. Homeowners associations hire private security to patrol streets that police no longer adequately cover, creating a two-tiered system where wealthy neighborhoods buy safety while poorer areas suffer. Business improvement districts employ security guards to protect commercial strips, but guards without arrest powers can only observe and report, creating theater of safety without substance. Residents form neighborhood watch groups and communication networks to warn each other about threats, essentially becoming their own surveillance and security system because official systems have failed. The privatization of public safety increases inequality and fragments the city into protected enclaves and abandoned zones, destroying any sense of shared civic community. Those who can afford protection buy it. Those who cannot accept danger as their daily reality and try to endure. The government that collects taxes supposedly to provide public safety has outsourced that responsibility to those wealthy enough to purchase it privately, while everyone else fends for themselves. Public transportation has become a particularly dangerous environment where the city's failures concentrate into mobile crime scenes. The metro system reported mixed crime statistics, with crimes against persons decreasing by 10% in January 2025 compared to December 2024. But these numbers mask the reality that riders experience daily. Aggressive behavior from individuals experiencing homelessness or mental health crises makes riders feel unsafe even when no crimes occur. Drug use happens openly on trains and platforms, with users sometimes becoming hostile when other passengers react negatively. Sexual harassment and assault remain underreported but pervasive, especially targeting women riding alone.
Theft occurs routinely, with phones and bags grabbed as trains reach stations, leaving victims standing on platforms as their belongings disappear through closing doors. The Metro's attempts to improve safety have proven inadequate, with security presence too sparse to deter crime and too inconsistent to create genuine deterrence.
Many residents have stopped using public transportation entirely, reverting to cars, despite traffic nightmares and environmental costs, because personal vehicles feel safer than shared public space. The collapse of public transit safety represents another broken promise of urban life, another system that should work but does not. Another reason why Los Angeles feels less like a functional city and more like a failed experiment in what happens when government stops performing basic functions. Women experience Los Angeles danger in particularly acute ways that statistics fail to capture adequately. Sexual assault and harassment remain severely underreported, with most incidents never reaching official statistics, because victims know reporting rarely leads to investigation or prosecution. Women adjust their entire lives around avoiding danger, planning routes that feel safer even when longer, avoiding certain neighborhoods and times entirely, carrying weapons or defense tools as routine precautions. The mental burden of constant threat assessment exhausts women who just want to move through the world without treating every public space as potentially hostile. Homeless encampments create especially dangerous environments where women report being followed, harassed, and assaulted with no recourse because police do not respond to calls from or about encampments. The city's failure to address homelessness and mental health crises creates particular dangers for women who become targets for individuals whose untreated conditions manifest as sexual aggression or violence. Dating and socializing require elaborate safety precautions unknown in functional cities, with women sharing locations with friends, arranging safety check-ins, avoiding first dates in certain areas entirely. The gendered dimension of Los Angeles danger rarely enters public discussions, dominated by statistics about homicides and property crime. Yet it shapes how half the population experiences the city every single day. Downtown Los Angeles exemplifies how a neighborhood can collapse into dysfunction despite massive investment and development. The area recorded 17 homicides in a recent reporting period and remains one of the highest crime zones in the city, despite billions spent on redevelopment and revitalization. The Skid Row area concentrates homelessness and all associated problems into a zone where conditions shock even hardened residents from other troubled areas. Open-air drug markets operate with brazen visibility, with dealers and users conducting transactions in full daylight as pedestrians walk past. Violence erupts regularly within the homeless population concentrated there, with assaults and occasional murders receiving minimal attention because they occur in an area society has essentially written off. The surrounding downtown area that developers tried to transform into a vibrant urban core has seen residents and businesses flee as conditions deteriorated. Luxury apartments built during the development boom now sit partially vacant as residents who can afford to live anywhere choose to leave. Restaurants and retailers that opened optimistically have closed as foot traffic disappeared and crime made business untenable. The downtown collapse represents perhaps the most visible failure of Los Angeles' governing philosophy, where enormous sums spent on development and services produced no meaningful improvement and problems only intensified despite attention and resources. South Los Angeles continues struggling with violence and poverty that earlier crime reductions have not eliminated, maintaining dangerously high crime rates that make daily life precarious for residents. Gang activity remains endemic despite decades of suppression efforts, with territorial disputes, drug trafficking, and retaliatory violence creating ongoing threats. Children grow up navigating gang boundaries and learning which streets to avoid, which colors to not wear, which times to stay inside. The psychological damage inflicted on young people who mature in such environments radiates across generations, creating trauma that manifests in educational struggles, mental health problems, and continuation of violence cycles. Residents feel abandoned by city government that directs resources toward wealthier areas while leaving South Los Angeles to endure violence that would trigger emergency responses elsewhere.
The stark disparities in how different neighborhoods receive services and attention expose the reality that Los Angeles operates as multiple cities sharing a name, with wildly different levels of safety, investment, and governmental concern depending on residents' wealth and race. The failures of criminal justice reform have created political backlash that complicates addressing safety concerns honestly. Proposition 47, passed in 2014 to reduce penalties for certain property crimes, has been blamed for increases in theft and disorder. Critics argue that eliminating meaningful consequences for property crime removed the only deterrent preventing widespread theft, essentially legalizing stealing below certain dollar amounts. Supporters counter that mass incarceration never solved underlying problems, and that blaming reform ignores the reality that police simply stopped enforcing laws regardless of penalties. The debate has become so polarized that discussing safety concerns risks being labeled as coded racism or calls for returning to failed war on drugs policies. This political paralysis prevents honest conversation about what actually works to create safety versus what makes people feel morally righteous while conditions deteriorate. Residents suffering from crime and disorder do not care about ideological purity. They want to feel safe in their neighborhoods and see their property protected. When progressive governance cannot deliver safety while preaching compassion, and conservative governance offers only punitive responses that never worked before, residents lose faith in political solutions entirely and retreat into private coping mechanisms that fragment community even further. But that is not even the worst part. The worst part is how quickly people adapt to dysfunction, how rapidly the unacceptable becomes normal, how easily we adjust expectations downward until we no longer believe cities should function well or governments should solve problems. Residents start accepting property crime as inevitable, homeless encampments as permanent features, aggressive behavior as something to navigate around rather than something that should be addressed. We develop elaborate workarounds and coping strategies for what should be basic expectations of urban life. We stop going certain places, avoid certain times, accept that parts of our city are simply too dangerous or unpleasant to access. The psychological toll of lowered expectations and constant adaptation exhausts civic spirit and community connection. When nobody believes anything will improve, when everyone assumes government cannot or will not solve problems, the collective will to demand better atrophies completely. We become individualized survival units rather than citizens with legitimate demands on government performance. This may be the darkest aspect of Los Angeles' current reality. Not just that it is dangerous and dysfunctional, but that danger and dysfunction have been normalized to the point where people stop even imagining alternatives. Empty promises, empty streets after dark, empty faith in institutions that stopped working. Los Angeles has become a case study in how quickly urban civilization can deteriorate when government stops performing basic functions and residents lose confidence that anyone with power will fix fundamental problems. The city that represented glamour and possibility now represents cautionary lessons about what happens when inequality becomes too extreme, when homelessness is tolerated rather than solved, when crime is accepted rather than prevented. Residents who remain do so despite the city's failures rather than because of anything it offers beyond weather and geography. They lock their doors, avoid certain areas, lower their expectations, and hope their particular block stays relatively safe even as surrounding zones deteriorate. This is not living. This is surviving. This is what remains when the promises collapse and the reality becomes something we navigate rather than something we enjoy. The dark side of Los Angeles was always there, hidden beneath the sunshine and celebrity and promotional materials that sold a fantasy to the world. The homelessness, the inequality, the racial disparities, the unaffordable housing, the inadequate infrastructure all existed before, but were managed better or hidden more effectively or simply affected fewer people. What changed is not that problems appeared, but that they overwhelmed the systems meant to contain them and became impossible to ignore or spin away.
The city revealed itself as fundamentally unable to provide basic safety and order, unable to house its residents, unable to maintain public spaces where everyone feels welcome and secure. Nobody feels safe here anymore because safety requires trust in systems and institutions, confidence that government will respond when called, belief that living in a city means accessing shared resources and protections. Los Angeles broke that trust completely. It stopped pretending that government works or that anyone in charge knows how to fix what is broken. The dark side is not crime statistics or homeless counts. The dark side is the revelation that the city cannot or will not provide what cities exist to provide: functional shared spaces where residents can live without fear and build communities based on more than just survival. If you have felt this fear too, this sense that something fundamental has broken in how cities function and governments govern, share your story in the comments and let others know they are not alone in feeling abandoned. And if you found this revealing, subscribe, because the next investigation might expose which other cities are following Los Angeles down this same path, which other promises are about to break, which other illusions are ready to shatter. It is time we acknowledged what we have lost when we accepted that safety is optional, that homelessness is inevitable, that disorder is just how cities are now. It is time we demanded better, or admitted honestly that we have given up on believing government can deliver what we pay it to provide. The dark side of Los Angeles is not hidden anymore. It is visible on every street, in every encampment, in every resident's eyes, as they scan for threats that might never come, but that they cannot stop anticipating. That is the truth they do not want you to know. Nobody feels safe here anymore, because Los Angeles has become genuinely unsafe in ways both measurable and psychological, and nobody with power to change it seems to care enough to try.